Sergeant Lena Carter stood at the observation window, her eyes tracing the black void of space as Titan loomed in the distance. The pale moon's surface glimmered under Saturn's rings, but all that filled Lena's mind was the low hum of the station's systems and the incoming threat from the Zuqari. "Approaching in 2 minutes, Sergeant," a voice crackled through the comms. It was Lieutenant Hale, stationed in the communications hub, his tone tense. Lena barely acknowledged him, her gaze still fixed on the dark horizon. She could feel the weight of the moment settling over her. She didn't need to check the time. The Zuqari were coming. They had been warned, loudly, mockingly, by Zorthan himself. Primitive, the Zuqari commander had called Earth's weapons in their last transmission. A species that still relies on these archaic devices will be nothing but dust when faced with the might of true technology. Zorthan's voice had dripped with disdain, his words punctuated by the sound of something heavy slamming on a table, no doubt a piece of alien equipment he considered far superior. Lena's lips curled into a slight smile as she adjusted her position. "We'll see about that." Behind her, the rest of the team was already prepping, checking their gear with practiced efficiency. Corporal Sims, his hands steady despite the mounting tension, looked up from his rifle. "They really think we'll fold like that? With all their toys?" Lena didn't respond immediately. Instead, she surveyed the small, makeshift command center, cold, sterile walls lined with monitors and display panels showing vital signs and battlefield data. There was nothing fancy about it, nothing that screamed advanced technology. But there didn't need to be. "Your rifles are calibrated, Sims?" Lena asked, her voice steady, professional. "Double-check. This won't be a quick skirmish." Sims gave a nod. "Yes, ma'am." Behind him, Specialist Kelly was adjusting the sniper drone's trajectory. She'd been silent until now, but her focused expression told Lena everything she needed to know. Kelly had learned to trust her team's instincts, and that was what made them so effective. "I've got your back," Kelly said softly, catching Lena's eye for a brief moment. There was an unspoken bond between the two of them, built on years of missions where survival depended not on advanced technology, but human ingenuity. Lena surveyed the team one last time, her gaze lingering on the weapons laid out in front of them. Their rifles, simple by galactic standards, were Earth-made, built for precision, not spectacle. Unlike the Zuqari, whose weapons were sleek and intimidating, these were tools of quiet, deadly efficiency. The comms crackled again, this time from Sergeant Hale. "Zuqari ships entering Titan's orbit. They're here." Lena inhaled deeply and stood upright. There was no fear, no doubt. Just resolve. "Move out," she ordered, her voice clear and commanding. The team fell into line, gathering their gear and making their way to the surface deployment bay. The sound of boots against metal echoed through the hall, blending with the ambient hum of the station. As they passed through the airlock, the cold of Titan's surface hit them like a wall. The thin atmosphere had no warmth to offer, just the faintest whisper of wind, carrying the scent of alien dust. "Sniper, 800 meters northeast. The ridge," Lena commanded as she adjusted the rifle slung across her back. Kelly nodded, taking the position. She was always ready, a ghost in the cold expanse, just like Lena. They settled into position, the rest of the team taking strategic places around the outpost's perimeter. The Zuqari were known for their brutal tactics and technological superiority. But in this terrain, with its jagged, uneven landscape, they would be forced to play by Earth's rules. No amount of laser-guided precision could compensate for a skilled sniper in the hills, concealed by terrain and shadow. Minutes passed. Through the scope of her rifle, Lena watched the first of the Zuqari troops deploy from their landing ship. They moved with precision, their armor glinting in the weak sunlight, their weapons advanced beyond anything Earth had. They didn't need to speak. The way they moved told Lena everything she needed to know about their arrogance. "They think they're invincible," she muttered to herself, adjusting the rifle's aim. Sims was on her right, crouched low. "They don't know what they're up against." Lena's lips thinned into a slight smile. The Zuqari were about to learn. One shot at a time. Zorthan's ship landed with a rumble, kicking up clouds of dust and debris. He stepped out with a squad of elite soldiers, towering over the rest of the troop. He had a presence, commanding, unrelenting. His armor was like a second skin, gleaming under the alien sun. He surveyed the Earthlings with a cold, calculating gaze before his voice rang out across the comms. "Look at you," Zorthan sneered, his words cutting through the static. "Pathetic. You hide behind your primitive weapons and think you're a threat? How quaint." Lena didn't flinch. She could feel her team tense at the sound of his voice, but she didn't let it show. The last thing they needed was to show any weakness. "Let him talk," she said, her voice calm and measured. "We'll see how long that arrogance lasts," Sims muttered under his breath. Zorthan's troops began to fan out, their movements deliberate, their eyes scanning the horizon for signs of resistance. The team remained still, hidden in the shadows of the rocky outcroppings. Lena's finger rested lightly on the trigger, waiting for the perfect shot. Then, it came, an opening. A lone Zuqari soldier made a fatal mistake, stepping too far out into the open. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of his armor to Lena's sharp senses. She exhaled slowly, focused, and squeezed the trigger. The crack of the rifle broke the silence of the moon's barren landscape. The bullet struck true, tearing through the soldier's armor and dropping him instantly. The rest of the Zuqari didn't know where the shot came from. They scattered, their movements chaotic for the first time. "Target neutralized," Lena said coolly, as if the world hadn't just shifted. There was no triumph in her voice, just the quiet professionalism that had kept her alive through countless battles. Zorthan's voice came again, this time with a hint of frustration. "It's only a fluke," he spat. "You'll fall, one by one." Lena smiled again, just barely. "Fluke? I don't think so." The hunt had begun. The silence after Lena's shot felt endless, broken only by the distant hum of Zuqari engines and the occasional crackle of static on the comms. The team remained still, each soldier tense, waiting for the inevitable retaliation. Lena's heart beat steadily, her breathing slow and controlled as she scanned the rocky landscape through the scope. She didn't need to look at her team. They were already in position, anticipating the next move. Zorthan's voice shattered the quiet, but this time, there was no mockery in his tone. Only fury. "Find them!" he bellowed, the words slicing through the air like a blade. "Whoever fired that shot, kill them." Lena tightened her grip on her rifle, steadying her breath. The Zuqari were good, no doubt. They'd track the trajectory, try to pinpoint her position, but they had no idea how well Earth's snipers used the terrain to disappear. They were about to find out. "Don't let them scatter," Lena whispered into the comms, her voice low but firm. "Stay sharp. Sims, Kelly, position yourselves for the next shot. Keep them guessing." Sims gave a small nod, his eyes narrowed as he moved swiftly, gliding between rocks and rubble with the practiced ease of a seasoned soldier. Kelly, too, moved like a shadow, silent and precise. Lena didn't need to watch them to know their movements were flawless. Her focus remained on the unfolding chaos below. Through the scope, she saw the Zuqari scrambling, their armor reflecting the pale light as they scattered in every direction. But they weren't running, they were hunting, searching for the origin of the shot with an intensity that only increased their vulnerability. The arrogance had slipped from Zorthan's voice, replaced by something darker, more desperate. Lena shifted her aim, lining up her next target. One of the Zuqari soldiers, young, nervous, had broken from the group and made a dash for cover, exposing himself in the process. He was easy prey. With a slow exhale, she pulled the trigger. The rifle recoiled sharply, the sound of the bullet tearing through the air followed by the sickening thud of it finding its mark. The soldier dropped instantly, his body crumpling to the ground in a heap. No cry of pain, just the sound of his armor hitting the dirt. Sims cursed softly over the comms. "Damn, Lena. You're making it look easy." "Stay focused," Lena replied, the words clipped and professional. The mission wasn't over. Far from it. Zorthan's voice crackled again, now laced with anger. This is a waste of time. You cannot hide forever, human. You will fall. Lena ignored him, her eyes already scanning for the next target. Her hands moved with the kind of instinct honed through years of training, no thought necessary. It wasn't arrogance, it was survival. She knew the risks, knew the dangers of underestimating the enemy. But she also knew that she had something the Zuqari didn't: patience. Through her scope, she watched as the remaining soldiers formed up in a tighter, more defensive position. They were adapting to the situation, no longer blindly charging ahead. They had learned, at least temporarily, not to underestimate the humans. Regroup, Zorthan ordered, his voice tight. We will crush them. They are not invincible. Lena could hear the frustration in his voice. He was smart, too smart to keep making the same mistakes. He understood that his forces weren't just facing a superior technology, they were facing a species that wouldn't quit. A species that was built for moments like this. Her finger hovered over the trigger again. She could take the shot, but there was something in Zorthan's tactics that intrigued her. He was pulling back, repositioning. He wasn't just sending his troops forward blindly anymore, he was trying to outthink her. This wasn't just a fight against a superior army. It was a battle of wits, of strategy. Kelly, move in, Lena said, her voice calm but urgent. You've got a better angle from the ridge. Sims, cover her. I'll hold them off from here. A brief moment of silence passed before Kelly's voice came over the comms, calm and focused. Copy that. Lena watched as Kelly shifted position, her movements swift but deliberate, disappearing into the rocks with the same quiet precision that Lena had used earlier. Sims followed, slipping into the shadows just as easily. They were a well-oiled machine, each soldier doing their part without question. There was no room for hesitation here. Not with the odds stacked as they were. Another movement caught Lena's eye. Zorthan himself was advancing, flanked by a small group of elite guards. The commander was relentless, pushing forward even as his soldiers fell. He had the aura of a man who believed failure was not an option. But Lena could see the cracks in his confidence. The Zuqari had underestimated Earth's capacity to fight. Now they were paying the price. Kelly, you have a shot? Lena asked, her eyes flicking back to the scope. Zorthan was in her line of sight, but he wasn't exposed enough. Not yet. I'm in position, Kelly replied. But it's tight. I need him to make the first move. Lena nodded. He will. He's too arrogant not to. True to her words, Zorthan pushed forward again, barking orders to his soldiers. He was closing the gap, determined to make a statement. But Lena knew better than to let emotions drive tactics. The Zuqari were good, but they still had much to learn about human resolve. Take the shot, Kelly, Lena said firmly. There was a pause. Then the crack of the rifle. Zorthan's guard dropped to the ground, his body jerking as the bullet found its target. But Zorthan himself, incredibly, managed to dive for cover, narrowly avoiding the kill shot. Lena swore under her breath, frustration creeping into her calm exterior. He's learned, she muttered. Not enough, Sims retorted. We'll get him. He's too predictable. Lena kept her eyes on Zorthan, watching as he scrambled to reorganize his forces. This was the turning point. He was no longer the confident commander, mocking Earth's weapons. The Zuqari were reeling, trying to adjust to a kind of warfare they hadn't expected, a warfare that valued patience over firepower, precision over overwhelming force. He won't give up, Sims said, his voice grim but determined. Lena smiled faintly, her finger inching toward the trigger. Neither will we. Zorthan's forces began to regroup, but it was clear, they had lost the momentum. Earth's snipers, with their simple but effective weapons, were proving to be a much greater threat than the Zuqari had ever anticipated. The hunt wasn't over, but the tide had turned. The wind whispered over the desolate surface of Titan, carrying the faintest trace of alien dust as Lena adjusted her scope. Her hands were steady, despite the mounting tension. Through the lens, she saw Zorthan's forces regrouping. His elite guards were becoming more cautious now, their movements measured. The once confident Zuqari had turned from a bold assault to a tactical retreat, their arrogance stripped away by each human casualty. Lena exhaled, her breath steady as she surveyed the landscape. The ridge where Kelly had positioned herself was now the perfect vantage point. Her sniper drone hovered silently nearby, its sensors scanning the enemy with precision. It was quiet, too quiet. The once chaotic battlefield had settled into a momentary lull, broken only by the occasional command from Zorthan. Targeting Zorthan, Kelly's voice came through the comms, calm yet sharp. Just waiting for the perfect moment. Lena's eyes narrowed. The Zuqari leader had been more elusive than she'd expected. He was no fool, ducking behind cover with uncanny precision every time she had a shot lined up. But Lena could tell that his arrogance was beginning to erode. He wasn't leading, he was reacting. That, more than anything, told her that the battle was turning in their favor. "Hold your fire, Kelly," Lena ordered, her voice quiet but firm. "He's too valuable a target. If we take him out now, we risk scattering the others. We need them to stay cohesive." "I understand," Kelly replied, a brief crack of frustration slipping through her otherwise stoic tone. Lena's mind raced as she watched Zorthan's troops shuffle, falling back into a defensive formation. The Zuqari were adapting, trying to outthink them. She could almost see the calculations running through their commander's mind, the internal debate about whether to strike or pull back. They were no longer the unstoppable force they had once believed themselves to be. Zorthan's soldiers were showing signs of hesitation, moments of uncertainty. The very essence of their superiority had been challenged, and it was unraveling. "Do you see this?" Sims whispered, his voice cutting through the static of the comms. He was watching the enemy movements, always the keen observer. "They're not charging anymore. They're biding their time," Lena finished, cutting him off. "Don't let up. They're regrouping. But they're not retreating." "Not yet." Sims didn't reply immediately. He was focused, watching through his own scope as Zorthan's troops consolidated, moving with disciplined precision. The Zuqari were known for their adaptability, and Lena could see them recalibrating their strategy. They weren't just reacting, they were planning. But there was one thing the Zuqari didn't know: their plans would never be enough to defeat Earth's will. "Sergeant," Kelly spoke again, her voice steady as always. "I've got an idea." Lena's brow furrowed, sensing the seriousness in Kelly's tone. "Go ahead." "Let me take Zorthan out from the ridge," Kelly suggested, her words crisp, sharp. "I'll aim for his knee joint. It'll force him to the ground. He won't be able to escape as easily, and the other soldiers won't have the time to react." Lena considered it. The risk was high, but it wasn't an unwinnable gambit. Taking out Zorthan would give them a significant advantage, but if it failed, the rest of the Zuqari might finally realize just how badly they'd underestimated their opponent. "I trust you, Kelly," Lena said, her voice tight with resolve. "But if this goes south, we fall back and regroup." "Understood." Kelly's response was immediate, unflinching. "Understood, Sergeant." Lena watched as Kelly adjusted her position, her sniper rifle glinting faintly against the light. In the distance, Zorthan was still moving behind cover, barking orders to his remaining troops. Every so often, his head would poke out, giving Kelly the chance she needed. "Focus, Kelly," Lena murmured under her breath. She wasn't worried about Kelly's skill. It was the Zuqari's unpredictability that made this moment so fraught with danger. If they acted too quickly, if they underestimated their enemy, they could lose everything. Then, just as Lena felt the tension in the air stretch to its breaking point, Kelly's voice came through again, calm and collected. "I have him." The seconds stretched as Lena held her breath, watching the ridge through her own scope. Zorthan stepped into view again, moving confidently as he ordered his remaining forces into position. He had no idea what was coming. Then, the shot rang out, a crack that sliced through the atmosphere, followed by the sound of the bullet hitting its mark. For a moment, Lena thought it hadn't worked. Zor then didn't drop. He remained standing, one hand clutching his weapon, barking orders to his guards. But then, his movements slowed. He staggered, his hand shooting down to his knee, where a trail of dark blood began to seep from the armor. Sims cursed. Got him. Zorthan's voice came again, this time filled with pure rage. This is not over. You will pay for this, human filth. Lena's eyes flicked to the rest of the battlefield, watching as the Zuqari soldiers hesitated. Some of them turned to look at their fallen commander, their faces registering shock and confusion. The battle had taken a turn. The Zuqari had lost their leader's confidence. Their once well-coordinated assault was now in disarray. Move in, Lena commanded. Sims, cover Kelly. We press forward. The team sprang into action. Kelly, despite the risk, began adjusting her position, moving forward with calculated precision. Sims, ever watchful, followed, his rifle raised and ready. They were no longer acting from a defensive stance. The hunt was on, and the Zuqari had no idea how much danger they were truly in. Lena led the charge, her own rifle held at the ready, scanning the battlefield for any signs of movement. The Zuqari were retreating, their disciplined lines faltering, as if they weren't sure whether they should stay and fight or flee entirely. Zorthan is down, Kelly confirmed over the comms. But they're not giving up. They're regrouping again. Lena nodded grimly. They're not done. But they're close. The Zuqari were beginning to scatter, their once proud formation shattered by the loss of their commander. Their morale had plummeted. Zorthan had been the glue holding them together, and without him, they were nothing but a disorganized force, scrambling to survive. Hold tight, Lena said. This is the final push. As the team advanced, the Zuqari began to retreat in earnest, their backs turned to the humans who had proven, in one swift moment, that they were not to be underestimated. The battlefield, once filled with the sounds of alien weapons and Zuqari commands, was now eerily silent except for the distant hum of the retreating enemy. It was clear now, the Zuqari were running. And Earth had won. The sun was setting behind Titan's jagged horizon, casting a long shadow over the barren battlefield. The once thriving hum of Zuqari weapons had died down, leaving only the quiet hiss of the wind across the rocky terrain. Lena crouched behind a craggy outcrop, her eyes scanning the dimming landscape. The enemy was retreating, broken, scattered, but they were far from defeated. Not yet. We've got them on the run, Sims said, his voice crackling through the comms, the hint of satisfaction clear even in his measured tone. He was crouched beside her, his rifle trained on a cluster of Zuqari soldiers moving toward the distant tree-line. It's almost over. Lena didn't respond immediately. She watched the enemy's movements carefully, analyzing their formation. There was no organized retreat now, just desperate survivors stumbling through the wilderness of Titan's rocky surface. Some were injured, others disoriented, but all of them were dangerous. This wasn't a victory, not yet, not until they were all accounted for. The hunt wasn't over. She looked over her shoulder at Kelly, who was taking cover further down the ridge. The sniper's rifle glinted in the fading light as she scanned the enemy from her elevated position. Kelly wasn't talking, her focus was complete. She knew as well as Lena that the Zuqari wouldn't simply give up. This isn't their first retreat, Lena said quietly, more to herself than to the team. They'll regroup. They'll fight again. Doesn't matter. We've got their leader. They've lost their will to fight, Sims said, adjusting his position to get a better view. They'll scatter before they realize what happened. But Lena could feel something instinctive that told her they weren't finished yet. The enemy had been humiliated, yes. They had been forced to learn that Earth's soldiers, especially its snipers, could not be easily defeated. But that didn't mean they were broken. Zorthan's body had been left behind, his blood seeping into the alien soil, but it had made an impression on his soldiers. If the Zuqari were anything, it was persistent. They would come back, they would try again. She could almost hear it. Their pride wouldn't let them bow down to defeat so easily. Her calm crackled again, this time with Kelly's voice, smooth and calculated. "Sergeant, you're right. They're regrouping. A dozen or so near the eastern ridge, maybe more. We've underestimated them. They're not leaving." "Not yet." Lena's pulse quickened. Damn it. They were already planning their next move, and the humans had no idea what they were walking into. They'd thought the battle was over, but it hadn't been won yet. Zorthan had fallen, but the Zuqari still had their honor. And that was a dangerous thing to underestimate. "Everyone, fall back," Lena ordered, the words cutting through the air like a blade. She watched as Kelly shifted into position, her sniper rifle steady against the wind. "We're moving toward the eastern ridge. Prepare for another engagement." "What about Zorthan?" Sims asked, a touch of disbelief in his voice. "The guy's down. Why the hell are we still hunting?" Lena turned her gaze to the scattered, broken forces of the Zuqari. The pieces were falling into place in her mind, but she needed them to see it too. They weren't finished, not yet. "We can't let them regroup," Lena said, her tone unwavering. "Zorthan may be dead, but they're still dangerous. And if we let them flee now, they'll come back stronger." Kelly adjusted her position with the precision of a predator, the sniper rifle locked in her hand. "Understood, Sergeant." Sims didn't argue further. They had been in enough firefights to understand when a fight wasn't truly over. The team began to move, sweeping along the jagged terrain. Each step was measured, calculated. They weren't rushing into a fight they'd already won. They were closing in on the remnants of the Zuqari forces, preparing for whatever might come next. Lena kept her focus on the horizon, the shadows of the alien world stretching out before them like a blanket of uncertainty. They reached the eastern ridge, just as the last remnants of the Zuqari forces were organizing themselves behind a rocky outcrop. The enemy had learned, no doubt, and they were now forming a defensive line. Lena could see the strain on their faces, their movements tense, defensive. But they weren't ready. Not yet. Lena raised a hand to signal the team. Kelly had already positioned herself on a high ledge, and Sims was crouched lower, rifle poised and ready. Lena waited a beat, her breathing steady as she analyzed their next move. The Zuqari hadn't noticed them yet. They were too focused on the ridge, too determined to regroup. "They're vulnerable," Kelly's voice echoed in Lena's earpiece, calm and calculating. "I've got a clear shot on their perimeter." Lena glanced over her shoulder at Kelly, then at Sims, who was carefully picking off stragglers through his own scope. The moment was right. The Zuqari were about to make their final mistake. "Take them," Lena ordered sharply. In an instant, the crack of Kelly's rifle split the silence, followed by a few more shots from Sims. The first line of Zuqari soldiers dropped, their bodies crumpling in the dirt. The chaos erupted quickly, as the survivors scrambled for cover. But it was too late. The team moved in fast, a sudden wave of human precision and firepower crashing against the Zuqari defenses. The enemy hadn't expected the full force of Earth's resolve. The fight, once again, was on their terms now, controlled, calculated. "Fall back!" one of the Zuqari commanders shouted, his voice filled with desperation. But it was clear now, they were cornered. There was no escape. They could retreat, but they were already broken. Lena's rifle barked, and another soldier fell. The remaining Zuqari scrambled to retreat, but the human team was already on them. No longer were they in the defensive. Earth's soldiers had taken the initiative, and there was no going back for the Zuqari. As the last of the Zuqari soldiers fell, Lena surveyed the battlefield once more. There were no survivors now. The last stand had ended, and the result was inevitable. They had underestimated Earth, and it had cost them everything. Lena exhaled, the weight of the battle still heavy in her chest. She knew the mission was over, but it was more than just a victory. It was a message. The Zuqari would never forget this day, the day they'd learned just how dangerous humanity could be when pushed to the edge. "We've won," Sims said quietly, his voice breaking through the tension. "But don't let your guard down. We still don't know how deep their forces run. Lena gave a small nod. We'll be ready. Always. The team stood together on the ridge, the silent horizon before them. They had proven something today, not just to the Zuqari but to the universe. Humans, though small in numbers, were an unstoppable force when united. And that would be their legacy. Humanity had fought and won. And the galaxy would remember,